Hello and welcome to the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Re-Watch-Along Project. This is podcasting the way it used to be and the way you like it. This show is a production of the Something Else Podcasting Network, and it is episode number 033 of Smoky Mountain Wrestling from September 12th, 1992, taped August 31st, 1992, at the Pikeville College Gym in Pikeville, Kentucky. My name is Aria, and welcome to the show. Yes, we are in a new location this week. First of 3 episodes that are going to be taped here in Pikeville, Kentucky, in front of a guesstimated 200 people, because I couldn't find the attendance online, but I think 200 people is a good guesstimate looking at the crowd here. It's been about 200 for pretty much all of our tapings, or most of our tapings, if not all of them here. So in case this is the first time you've ever listened to the Smoky Mountain Re-Watch-Along Project, what we do is it's really quite simple, to quote Scott Hudson. We start with episode number 1 on February 1st, 1992. We go all the way to episode number 200 on November 26th, 1995. We talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, the so-so, the great, the fantastic, the tremendous, the shitty, the overrated, the underrated, and all in between. And we play some audio, listen to some promos, talk about the highlights and the lowlights and the in-between lights. And we go from there. We also talk about what else is happening in the world of wrestling, so you have an idea of what's going on September 12th, 1992. And, we just have a fun 45 to 50 minutes here. Of course, there are many different places you can be listening to this show at. This show is on angrymarks.com. This show is on YouTube. And of course, if you go to YouTube, you can also be watching the video versions of these shows as well. And, like I said, there are many ways to be watching this show or listening to this show. And hope wherever it is you're listening to it, you're actually enjoying it. Our numbers are ever so slowly creeping up, which is always fun. It's always great because, hey, while I enjoy doing the show, it's nice if other people are as well. So with that said, let's dive headfirst into the show. Let's go to the intro of the show with Bob Caudle and Dutch Mantell. We're going to talk about this week's show.
Hi, wrestling fans. Welcome to another exciting hour of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Wrestling the way it used to be and the way you like it. I'm Bob Caudle, and we got a great hour in store for all of you fans this week. We're going to see in action Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. Jim Horner will also wrestle on today's program. We're going to be hearing from Jim Cornette and his Heavenly Bodies. We'll get an update, too, on the bounty that's been placed on Brian Lee and the mysterious man that's been stalking him. The Dirty White Boy will defend the heavyweight title, and our main event will see Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden take on Nitro Danny Davis and Dixie Dy-no-mite. And my tag partner right here, Dutch Mantell. Dutch?
First of all, these posters that I'm holding in my hand right here, they've been put up all around the Smoky Mountain area. Now, what's going to go on my special guest today on Down and Dirty with Dutch will be Commissioner Bob Armstrong and the most wanted man in America, Brian Lee, and they're going to be my special guest right here today, and we're going to find out a little more because I understand they have got the mystery man, another letter from the mystery man that's put at the $10,000.
All right, fans, that and more during this hour. We're about ready with action, so let's go to the ring.
Okay, then. So Dutch has the Brian Lee wanted posters in his hand, and we have quite the little show here for us this week. We're going to have, Dirty White Boy defending the Smoky Mountain title. It's going to be a similar gimmick to what we saw a few weeks ago, where he's got the names of the top 10 contenders. They're in a hat. He's going to pull out the challenger of the day. Will it be Tim Horner? Is it going to be Primetime Brian Lee, Paul Orndorff, Robert Gibson, Dixie Dy-no-mite? Somebody's getting a title shot today, and we're going to see who it is. Main event is a main event anywhere in the world. Stud stable, Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden, 2-on-2 with Dixie Dy-no-mite and Nitro Danny Davis, who got his title shot a couple weeks ago. So not sure if he just goes back into the bag or back into the hat, so to speak, or if he has lost his one and only title match. We're also going to have Bullet Bob Armstrong and the most wanted man in America, Primetime Brian Lee, on Down and Dirty with Dutch, because apparently, we have another letter from our mystery man, who is the man who is stalking Primetime Brian Lee, and as we've acknowledged, is somebody who is out for actually Bullet Bob Armstrong. And since they find the best way to go after him is to go after his fair-haired boys here. So to go to our first match, it is Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff versus Ben Jordan. We're talking about who it could be that's doing these random, that's setting up these sneak attacks on Brian Lee, that's behind the bounty on Brian Lee's head. Is it Paul Orndorff? Dutch reiterates that Orndorff is not that kind of man who would put a bounty on him. He may go after the bounty, but he's not the man who would do it himself. Jordan, for the most part, fares better than other recent jobbers, as he did have to fight for everything he got, but Orndorff sold more for him than he has for others. Jordan did fly 10 feet over Paul's head when missing a flying crossbody, which let Paul take back over. They reiterate what's going on with Orndorff and Ronnie Garvin, and Orndorff won with a knee drop off the top rope. Orndorff went for a pile driver after the match, but Mark Curtis warned him about it, so he didn't do it. And I guess you can say that's the kind-hearted nature of Paul Orndorff, because like he's ever minded hitting people with pile drivers before, but now he's decided not to. So good for him. Good for Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. He's thinking about the health and well-being of Ben Jordan, who I'm pretty sure was one of the guys that Mr. Wonderful went berserk on back in April when he laid out, half of the underneath baby faces with a pile driver or 4 or 5. So from here, we go to a Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff promo, and let's go to that now.
All right, and Dutch, right you are. Let's bring him over here. Here's Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, fans. And Paul, we've been talking about the $10,000 bounty in Brian Lee. There's been a lot of speculation that Paul Orndorff may be behind that. He may be the one putting up the $10,000.
Let's just get one thing straight. The whole Smoky Mountain Wrestling and everybody concerned, Bob, what's his name, Armstrong, the commissioner?
Yeah.
You know what it is? Because I got a face like Robert Redford, a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and a mind like Albert Einstein. They're all jealous. Every man sitting out there is jealous of Mr. Wonderful. And you call this the Mountain State? I ain't seen one mountain man yet. I've seen nothing but a bunch of babies, a bunch of sissies, and I'm sick and tired of it. Brian Lee, Ronnie Garvin, before it's all over and done with, I'm going to pile drive you, and it's going to be all over. I might even pile drive you.
All right, fans, we'll be back. Let's take this time out.
I want to see him pile drive Bob Caudle. Because, spoiler alert, Bob Caudle is not here the entire 4 years. So I would love it. But, spoiler alert, Bob Caudle's not here 4 years, and neither is Paul Orndorff. And also, Paul Orndorff does not pile drive the announcer. Oh well. But Orndorff talks about how everyone is jealous of his looks, brains, and abilities. He looks like Robert Redford, has the brain of Einstein, and he's seen nothing but babies and sissies here in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and vows to pile drive both Brian Lee and Ronnie Garvin. So he's still on the outlook for a Brian Lee. And I mean, hey, as we mentioned, there's a $10,000 bounty. And what better way to cripple a man and get that bounty than with the most dangerous hold, the most dangerous move in professional wrestling, the pile driver. And so, yeah. From there, we recap what happened last week, with our tag team title match, where in case you didn't join us, first of all, what the hell's wrong with you? Go listen to the show. It is, the hottest. This is the hottest podcast, out there right now. Not just because I'm sitting here in November. Actually, it's December, Sitting here in December, not wearing a shirt because it's too warm in my apartment, even with my space heater turned off. But this is the hottest podcast out there, and why didn't you listen to us last week, where the Fantastics lost the Smoky Mountain Tag Team titles to the Heavenly Bodies after Jim Cornette pulled out a rag, covered it in ether, and smothered Bobby Fulton with it. Anywho, we're going to go to a Fantastics promo, which will segue into a Heavenly Bodies promo.
You know, Bobby, everybody saw what happened last week. Once again, the Heavenly Bodies cheated us, and they took our tag team belts. They put something over you. I don't know if it was ether, some type of chemical, but like I said, they stole our belts.
Well, the fact remains, Jackie, that we told them for $20,000 we'd put those belts up, and Cornette seemed to have got to us once again. You know, when I woke up, out of a daze, the smell was still within me, and it lasted a couple of days. But the hatred that I have inside for Cornette and the Heavenly Bodies remain right here. Cornette, I feel we were robbed of the $20,000 and robbed of the tag team titles right there on television. Commissioner Bob Armstrong said there was nothing he could do. He couldn't step in because there was no disqualification and anything could happen. Well, it did. Well, Cornette, we have a surprise with the Heavenly Bodies. We have proven before that we could beat you guys. And coming up, we've got a match signed, a return title match. And let me tell you something, Cornette, and Fire on the Mountain, we proved we could beat the Heavenly Bodies. Well, this time, we're going to do it again because you're going to be at ringside, all right. But guess what, Cornette? You're going to be handcuffed to Commissioner Bob Armstrong, and you'll be ringside, brother, but you won't be in the ring. Heavenly Bodies, watch out, because the Fantastics are coming after those titles once again, and we're going to take them for the second time.
Stan, don't believe it took an act like that, a reprehensible act which Cornette pulled for you guys to regain the championship.
Never let it be said, Bob Cardle, that the world's greatest tag team has ever complained about anything. But let me just say this. After 13 years of being on top of this sport, I've had my share of injuries, but none have ever been of the magnitude of the injury that I sustained at the hands of the Fantastics. I've got a perforated eardrum. I have to wear protective headgear, and I want all the people in the Smoky Mountain area, it hurts when I talk this loud, but I'm so upset. I want all the people to keep the noise down. I could sustain permanent brain damage. And let me just say one other thing. I'm getting sick and tired of all these fat, disgusting, non-bad taking sweat hogs trying to hang all over us, trying to tear our clothes off, and trying to get close to us every chance they get. We've already said it time and time again, we do not associate with any female in the Smoky Mountain area because we have ours. We have our women flown in, whether it's from California, Florida, and yeah, even sometimes Texas, man. But just like seafood, we have our women flown in, man.
Yeah. Was it ether? Was it chloroform?
No, hey, maybe the ether bunny just came a little bit early this year. But you saw that interview right there with the Fantastics talking about Commissioner Bob Armstrong being handcuffed to me like a common criminal. Armstrong, you may used to be being in handcuffs, but I'm not. I've never been arrested in my life. You probably spent a lot of time in jail. But I tell you what, that just proves that Bob Armstrong is out to see these men lose the belts again, just like he did before. But it ain't gonna work this time, Commissioner. And as for that bounty, my man Killer Kyle right here, the human monster, invincible, invulnerable, impervious to pain. It's so easy to hurt others when you can't feel pain. He's coming after that $10,000, brother. And Brian Lee, I wouldn't be in your shoes for anything. And one more thing before I go. Everybody's been chanting, rock and roll, rock and roll. Well, let me tell you this. It's no secret that Jim Cornette's tag teams have had a long and violent feud with the Rock and Roll Express. And ever since we regained the Smoky Mountain Tag title, people have been coming up to us in airports, in hotels, all in restaurants saying, you're not true champions until you have beat the Rock and Roll Express. So, brother, we're going to rectify that situation. I asked for a match, and next week, right here on television, we're going to defend the title against Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express, and then, once they get their one chance at the title, and we beat them, and they don't win the belts, then they're never going to see these things again, brother, because we will have proved that we are true champions. by defending against the Rock and Roll Express and keeping this gold.
What about that bit of news, fans? Next week right here. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Okay, so 2 good promos back to back here, where we're going off in a couple different directions here, and really tells you what the future is here of the Smoky Mountain Tag Team titles. You know, the Fantastics talk about having the belt stolen from him. Bobby, you know, basically confirms it was ether and says that he could smell the ether for several days, but the hatred is still with them. They mentioned they have proven in the past, they have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they could beat the Heavenly Bodies, but now they're going to do it again. And their latest idea to keep Corny restrained at ringside is he's going to be handcuffed to our venerable commissioner, Bob Armstrong. So we're going to see what happens there. By the way, Bobby was wearing his All Japan soccer shirt, which is just a fantastic shirt. I love that shirt. I want one for myself. Do they still make those, and do they make it in 3X? If it helps, that X part is going down, but, you know, for now, I still need the 3X here, people. But, yeah, I need that shirt. Anywho, so that segues into the Heavenly Bodies promo here, and the whole segment goes about 5 minutes. And so it's a bit of a long promo, and to, you know, get some cheap heat here, Stan Lane does the gimmick. He talks about he has the perforated eardrum thanks to the Fantastics, and how it's important to keep the noise down because he may suffer permanent brain damage, which, of course, the fans, being good fans, they hear this and they scream louder at poor Stan. Dr. Tom is more worried, of course, about his women. He mentions that the women here in Smoky Mountains are all fat and ugly, and they need to fly in their women like they fly in their seafood. You know, California, Florida, Texas, they're flying them in here. Now, of course, the funny thing is, weren't the original segments about when we were finding the Heavenly Bodies, you know, what turned out to be the Heavenly Bodies, you know, is usually because women were all over them and that they were, you know, sleeping with them in hotel rooms, and thus they were too busy to show on TV. But, oh well, just turn your brain off sometimes. Anyway, Jim Cornette, with the line of the century, talks about how the Ether Bunny came early this year. That popped me. I gotta tell you, you know, not enough references are ever made to, you know, punny names like the Ether Bunny in wrestling. And I don't know how Corny came up with that one. And it's something that's so like, it's such an obvious line to make, but, you know, it was still just fantastic. It was still a tremendous line. They mentioned Killer Kyle's coming up to the $10,000 bounty. So basically, all of your rough and tough heels are all coming after the $10,000. And they mentioned that Killer Kyle is impervious to pain. Hey, we saw him get cracked in the head with a chair a few weeks ago, and he no-sold it. Spoiler alert, if you hit me in the head with a chair, I will sell it. Even if all I do is hold my hand to the back of my head and go, ow, motherfucker. True story. So then we set the stage for the Rock and Roll Express feud. And next week, right here on Smoky Mountain Wrestling, it is the Heavenly Bodies. It is the Rock and Roll Express. It is the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Championship. And it is Ricky and Robert's one and only shot at the belts. And you can believe me when I tell you, this is the only time in the Smoky Mountain Wrestling history that Ricky and Robert are going to get a shot at the Tag Team Championship of the world of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Now, we're going to talk about something that basically happens in every small territory back in the 80s and 90s. We're getting the Dream Match Contest. In case you don't know what a Dream Match Contest is, let's go to Bob Caudle to tell us about it.
Fans, here's news about an exciting new contest from Smoky Mountain Wrestling. It's the Dream Match Contest. where you can pick the matches you'd like to see. Write to Smoky Mountain Wrestling with your dream match, picking any match you'd like to see featuring the stars of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Each week on TV during the month of November, a different dream match will be picked, and you'll see it right here with some great prizes for the winners and a chance at the grand prize for all that enter. Now, here's the information on how you can enter the Dream Match Sweepstakes.
Smoky Mountain Wrestling and Classy Motors of Knoxville present the Dream Match Sweepstakes. 5 dream matches will be chosen to air on Smoky Mountain Wrestling, one each weekend in November. If your match is chosen, your name drawn, you'll receive a package of videotapes, T-shirts, and more valued at over $50. All dream matches entered are eligible for the grand prize. An all-expense-paid trip to Thanksgiving Thunder in Knoxville, Tennessee on Thanksgiving weekend. Round-trip airfare for 2 where applicable. Hotel, limousine transportation to and from the event. Ringside tickets and dinner with your favorite wrestling star. To enter, send your dream match to Dream Match, Post Office Box 1279, Morristown, Tennessee, 37016. Include your name, address, and phone number. Deadline for entries is Wednesday, October 7th. The Dream Match Sweepstakes, part of Dream Match Month. A November to remember from Smoky Mountain Wrestling and Classy Motors of Knoxville.
It is a November to remember, a year and 2 months before ECW ever ran that show. So send in the matches that you want to see. It's not just to your television station, it's to a specific P.O. box. And the problem with that very specific P.O., actually the P.O. box was correct. But the zip code that they announced, and you heard them say, for Morristown, Tennessee, was 37016. On the graphic they show on TV, it's 37816. And I guess I should, I don't know if I don't actually have to do this, I know, but let's see what their zip code actually is. Although, I don't know if you can change the zip code, but let me see here. So their actual zip code is 37816. So if you're sending in a dream match, do not listen to, the voiceover guy. Listen to me and believe the graphic, 37816. Now, if your match is chosen, you will get a prize pack of $50 of SMW merchandise, videotapes, T-shirts, and other bullshit. And if you are the grand prize winner, you're going to get the grand prize, of course, not the booby prize, but the grand prize, an all-expense-paid trip to Thanksgiving Thunder in Knoxville, which I hope you're sitting down for this, is going to be over Thanksgiving weekend. Holy crap, I know, right? And in one of those nod to the future that you're going to forget before it happens kind of things, this is sponsored by Classy Motors. Classy Motors will come back and is a part of a couple really fun skits in Smoky Mountain history in a few years. So send in those dream matches. Do you want to see Joe Kazana versus Dixie Dy-no-mite? I don't know if you do or not, but that's an example of a match that you could want to see. Do you remember the WWF videotapes where they would essentially do the Coliseum match of the month, and it was like if fans would allegedly be sending in requests for these matches, and it's like it was always matches like it was never like Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior or shit like that. The matches were always like Typhoon versus Papa Shango. Now, me being me, I do kind of a perverse desire to watch Typhoon versus Papa Shango, but let's be honest, even the markiest Mark and Markdom never sent in a letter wanting to see that match. But somehow, some way, they would always seem to win matches of that ilk. So we go back to the ring for our next match, Tim Horner versus Joe Kazana. Over on the Something Else podcast we do, where we talk about Mid-South Wrestling, we have entered 1983 in Mid-South Wrestling, and Tim Horner is getting his ass kicked by the Great Kabuki this week. So go check that out. And to sum up everything we've talked about for the past few weeks, Horner wants a title shot at the Dirty White Boy. And spoiler alert, that is going to be happening soon. But with that in mind, Mr. Ron Wright and Dirty White Boy are rolling out to the announce desk during this match.
A title shot.
All right, wait a minute. Here comes
Just a minute.
Here comes Mr. Ron Wright and the Dirty White Boy out. And Dutch, let's get them a microphone over here. And let's talk to him. I want to talk to him, Dutch.
Okay.
While they're out here and while this match is going on.
Go ahead.
Let me talk to Mr. Ron Wright into the Dirty White Boy out there and just ask him point blank, because in the ring right now is White Lightning, Tim Horner. Have you guys been avoiding Tim Horner?
Let me tell you something. We never avoid anybody. What the problem is, Tim Horner's been harassing me at home. He's called me on the telephone at 4 o'clock in the morning and got me out of bed. He's called me when I'm trying to eat supper. I can't even get time to take my arthritis medicine and my heart medicine for this man harassing me. He does it again. I've even jerked my telephone out of the wall and is calling the next door neighbors, trying to get me to the phone, wanting to know why we won't give him a title match.
Yeah, why don't you? Why don't you sign a match?
It's title match. He's not the #1 rated man. Tell him, man.
That's it, Bob. It's real simple. Who is Tim Horner? Who has he beat? Huh?
He's beaten all of his opponents right here at Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He's been wading right through them.
What opponents? I haven't seen anybody.
There's a
yet.
good one in there now in Joe Kazana.
He's had his people to go around here and sign him up on these little pits and matches that don't mean anything. He's never had nobody in there to beat.
Yes.
He's not even man enough to shine the Dirty White Boy.
I told you, Bob.
Let's have a title match with him, Bob.
If he's such an easy task for the Dirty White, look at Horner. Leaping right over.
Okay, so Mr. Wright is just, he's a tremendous promo. And it's like, it's sad that, in some ways it's sad that this is basically all of Mr. Ron Wright that I was ever aware of, or at least this was the first time I was ever aware of Mr. Ron Wright. Nazi promo from, 1988 notwithstanding. But it's like, he's just fantastic here. And it's like, I don't know. It's like, there's not a lot of people who could have done this. And A, being as funny as it is, but B, still somehow, like, in some weird way, kind of making it sound believable to some extent. Even though I know people are going to be yelling at me that no, it's not believable that Tim Horner is calling this guy nonstop. But you could claim that Horner got Mr. Ron Wright's phone number and he's calling him at home trying to get a shot at the title. So he had to rip the phone off the wall. And so now Horner is bugging his next door neighbor trying to get a title shot. Because as we've seen, Dirty White Boy lives in a junkyard and he probably doesn't have a television. Television. He probably doesn't have a television either. But probably doesn't have a telephone either. And so, yeah, Horner just wants a title shot. And Mr. Wright, while Horner I think he is undefeated here on television. It's been 32 episodes. I don't recall if he's well, technically he lost the what the hell was it called? The Mountain Mayhem Battle Royal to Buddy Landell, but technically he got cheated out of that one, and then he beat Buddy the next week, which set up that angle when Buddy shoved a check that was just down the front of his tights, his sweaty tights. He pulled it out and shoved it into Tim Horner's mouth, which, yeah, if I was Horner, Jesus Christ. But so Horner's pretty much won every match he's had here, and Mr. Wright basically points out that, without saying this, that he's done nothing but beat jobbers. After the audio that I just played ended, Caudle continues to poke the bear because, Caudle, the babyface announcer, trying to make the right thing happen here. He said that maybe DWB can't contend with Horner's skill and athletic ability. And if it's so easy to beat him, then why doesn't Dirty White Boy just sign up for a match and prove it? Mr. Wright says Horner is tough, but not as tough as Dirty White Boy, and thus doesn't deserve a title match. And in case you're curious what was happening in this match that I haven't been talking about, Tim Horner wins with a natural bridge, which Mr. Wright calls the most underhanded thing he's ever seen in his life. So now that the match is over, Horner's unfortunately got something to say.
And he gets, wait a minute, fans, right in front of the desk here. We've got something going on here. Tim Horner's intercepted Dirty White Boy.
Didn't even bother calling me.
All right, Tim Horner came right over here to confront him. What you say, Tim? You been leaving messages for him?
I've left you messages. Can't get a hold of the Dirty White Boy. I just want you to know, for the first time I get to confront you, because I can't catch you any other.
I'm a old, feeble, broke down man, Mr. Horner. Need no
See what
heart
you're
surgery
doing?
and a hip
You're upset me for no
implant.
reason.
I feel a heart attack coming on. We better get out of here now.
Calm down.
My heart's running away.
I'm not gonna touch you. I just want to know if my name's in that hat.
Your name, definitely. We keep everybody's name in the hat before we draw any names out here. Everybody's name.
He says your name's in there, Tim.
Well, I just want to make sure it's in there because I can't get a hold of you. All I want is a chance at that title. That's all I want.
All right, fans, it's in there according to them. Tim Horner's name in the hat. We'll be back right after this.
So Mr. Ron Wright just carried Tim Horner to a half-decent promo because he didn't have to just sit here and yammer on himself. Mr. Ron Wright got to cut in and say something of note here. Now, Mr. Ron Wright, of course, is having another heart attack, and he needs the white boy to take him away. Horner asked if his name is in the hat today for a title match, and Mr. Ron Wright says, yes, everybody's name is in the hat for a title match. Not a fan of our friend Tim, but at least when these two actually do have a match, it should at least be a good match. You know, even though the promos leading up to it, at least on the babyface standpoint, are going to suck. So from there, we go to Down and Dirty with Dutch and his guest this week, Bullet Bob Armstrong and Primetime Brian Lee, who are together at the hip at this point.
Everybody, welcome to Down and Dirty with Dutch. I'm Dutch Mantell, and you're not. Today, my special guest on Down and Dirty, of course, is Commissioner of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Bob Armstrong, and the most wanted man in America because of these posters that have been put all over the Smoky Mountain wrestling area. Now, Bob Armstrong, I know you're very concerned about these posters because you don't know the man behind it. And I just wanted to tell you my personal opinion. Of course, I think it's reprehensible. And I've often said that men shouldn't do this. And I think you should get to the bottom of the problem. I'm on your side, and I've always been on your side. Now, I understand that a mystery man has written another letter, and he sent it to you. And can you reveal it on Down and Dirty with Dutch today?
That's exactly right. That's why I came here, Dutch, is to read this letter to you that this sicko has written me. I can recognize the handwriting already. There's never a signature, but there's plenty of wanted posters around. I've got enough to wallpaper my house, and I'm sick of it, and Brian's sick of it. Listen to the letter. Commissioner Armstrong, you seem surprised that my follower keeps returning. All the police and all the security in the world cannot stop him from doing my will. You will regret having wronged me. All of wrestling will pay. You, Armstrong, will be forced to stand by and watch. You will be helpless to stop it. Brian Lee will be the first to suffer, but he won't be the last. Do not interfere with my errand boy, or more of your friends will be hurt. Now, I've racked my brains to think of somebody in my past that would be this sick to do something like this, and I can't think about it. People are on my back wanting a shot at Brian Lee for $10,000. Listen to this list. Dirty White Boy, Paul Orndorff, Killer Kyle, the Heavenly Bodies, and I've even had an offer from outside Smoky Mountain Wrestling for a $10,000 shot at him. And I'm going to tell you this, call me. Let's talk about it. Let's have a meeting. Let's be face to face. Let's be stand up about it. Maybe we can solve the problem. And if I find out anybody in Smoky Mountain Wrestling right now is involved in this, they're going to be banned, and that is forever. I'm going to give this to you, Brian Lee. You do with it what you've done the rest of them.
Well, first of all, let me say this now. This is an investigative segment that I'm doing right here. Brian Lee, I would just like to ask you right now, are you, to me, if somebody was doing this to me, I'd have a little trouble sleeping at night. Now, wait a minute. Can you sleep at night? Can you sleep at night?
You're exactly right. I can sleep.
Are you nervous?
Nervous is an understatement, but I'm going to do with this just what I've done with everyone else. It's like Bob Armstrong said, if the man will get in my face, it's much easier. I'm having to look over my back. I'm having to watch every shadow on the wall. $10,000 is a lot of money. And I tell you what, $10,000 will make a man hurt a man, but the only thing that's going to happen is Primetime Brian Lee's going to have to get tougher, and I'm going to get tougher starting today. I'm going to take this poster you have, rip it up, and I'm going to rip everybody up that gets in my face.
Well, there you heard it, fans. Bob Armstrong and Brian Lee. And Brian Lee, you can tear all the posters if you want to, but there's thousands floating around. Fans, don't go away. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay tuned.
You got to love Dutch, it's like it's so blatant that he's just playing both sides of the crowd here, or both sides of the fence here, and he's a heel. And of course, when he's interviewing a heel, or if he's just him and Caudle, he's gonna, be the voice of the heel. He's gonna talk up the heels, talk shit about the baby faces. And the second a babyface comes in and he's like, "Oh, my good friend Tim Horner, I'm behind you 100% here, buddy. You know I am." And it never stops being hilarious. But anyway, we're with Bullet Bob and Primetime Brian Lee here. And Bob mentions he's received yet another letter from our mystery man. And a mystery man who, by the way, that apparently, Bullet Bob knows the handwriting. It is something that, he remembers, but for some strange, odd, weird, unknown reason, he just can't put two and two together here and remember whose handwriting it is. So it's somebody from Bullet Bob's past. And they are coming for, they're coming for Primetime Brian Lee to take out him, to shove it down Bullet Bob's throat here. The letter says that this man's followers cannot be stopped by the police. They can't be stopped by security. Bullet Bob is unable to prevent them from what they're going to do. Bob has no idea who in his past could want to do this, and he will ban someone from Smoky Mountain Wrestling forever if they are in the company and behind this. Brian Lee points out that $10,000 will make a man hurt another man, and that this will make him tougher, and he rips up the posters in the ring. And what you didn't hear, because I pressed the mute button way too early, is Dutch telling the crowd to shut up. So, like I said, this is a storyline, and I guess we'll see how it plays out. But I know, if I recall correctly, we still have a good 6 to 8 weeks still before we find out who it is that's behind all this. So we'll see how it goes, because like I said, I know this thing, they stretch it out. And so we'll see here how it goes and if they can keep it going here. Because just on the surface, it sounds like it's way too long of a time to go here. But hey, if we're going to have Bullet Bob promos every week, I'm A-okay with that. Speaking of people who I'm A-okay if we get promos from them every week, Dirty White Boy and Mr. Ron Wright are out to determine the next challenger, this week's challenger, for a title match.
Fans, I'm here right now with the Dirty White Boy's manager, Mr. Ron Wright. And Mr. Wright, you've said he's going to be a fighting champion, that every week, right here, you're going to put everybody in Smoky Mountain Wrestling their name in the hat. You're going to draw a name out and have a title match right here on television every week. Am I correct?
That's right. That's the only way to do it. We've let the fine commissioner over here, Mr. Armstrong, write down the names of his top 10 contenders for this Smoky Mountain Heavyweight Championship title. I've got these 10 names right here that Mr. Armstrong wrote down, so everybody will know that you won't be nothing underhanded about it, because we want to take them, anybody that we draw out, and show everybody out here in this fine, wonderful Smoky Mountain TV wrestling matches here that we're men enough to give them a title match in there and beat them one at a time every week right here on Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
So you're not concerned. It doesn't matter to you who he draws out.
It doesn't matter what name I pull out of that hat, they get a shot at the belt. And Dutch, could I pose on you one more time for your hat? Thank you very much. Here you go, Ron. Just dumping names right in there.
Mix them up good. Make sure you get a good shot at it.
Okay, I'm going to look the other way. That way here we go.
It's hard on the poor man's heart not knowing who we're going to draw out of.
It's Newton Steffi. That's it. Newton Steffi.
Newton Steffi?
Newton Steffi is the man. Come on down, Newton Steffi. You're the next contestant for the Smoky Mountain Heavyweight title, baby.
He's one of the top men in the world, much less just here on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. One fine man.
All right, fans, he's going to defend that title, and there is Newton Steffi now in the ring, as the Dirty White Boy will put up that Smoky Mountain Heavyweight title against him right now. Let's go to the ring.
one of the top 10 contenders in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Newton Steffi, whomever the fuck that is. Newton Steffi here, ladies and gentlemen. And not to be confused with Stephanie Newton, who's apparently on Instagram, or the Stephanie Newton on LinkedIn, who's a CEO somewhere in Utah or on X. So it's probably not that important who, Newton Steffi really is at this point, since, poor Newton Steffi. But so Dirty White Boy, the key to this, and it's going to come back here, I promise, is he pulls out the name, and if you're not watching along on the video feed, he pulls out the name, he kind of looks at it, and you heard him go, yeah, it's almost as if it wasn't really Newton Steffi that was on the slip of paper he pulled out. But he takes the paper, he wads it up, throws it over his shoulder, and here we go. And it's Smoky Mountain champion Dirty White Boy with Mr. Ron Wright in his corner versus Newton Steffi, a short man with a porn stash and a singlet. Now, you may be like me and wondering who the fuck Newton Steffi is, but thankfully we have Dutch here to tell us about the credibility of our challenger today, Newton Steffi.
Dutch, is he a top contender?
Yes, he's a top contender. I actually have a bio sheet on Newton Steffi right here. He's actually the Canadian champion.
The what? The Canadian
The
champion?
Canadian champion. He is the champion of Canada.
Who did he defeat to become the champion?
He defeated the champion in Canada. That's who he did.
Has he defended that title many times in Canada?
Oh, yes, many times. He's defended it up there and come out on top.
What about some of the top names he's defended it against?
Well, everybody, I guess. I'm not real clear.
That's ridiculous. I think the Dirty White Boy is hand-picking his challenge.
No, he is not hand-picking his challenge. He doesn't have to. Dirty White Boy has a lot of talent. I said the other week, you ought to come with a dangerous label on him, because it should say, close bodily contact can result in serious bodily injury.
The Canadian champion who won the belt, he defeated the champion in Canada to win the belt, and he's defended the belt against everybody. That's great. So you might recall I mentioned that Dirty White Boy just crumbled up and threw the piece of paper over his shoulder. You might be wondering, what happened to that piece of paper? Let's go to Bob Caudle.
That's it. Judge, hand me that piece of paper, would you? Hand me that piece of paper. This piece of paper that the Dirty White Boy crumbled up. That name he drew out of the hat.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Look at there. Dutch, I want everybody to see that. You see whose name was really on there?
What name
was Tim Horner's name.
Oh, was that the piece of paper he threw down?
That was the crumpled piece of paper that he threw down, Dutch.
I don't know that. I don't think he pulled out Tim Horner's name out of the hat and threw it down, because Dirty White Boy is a man of high moral standards. He wouldn't do that.
So that crumbled up piece of paper had Tim Horner's name on it. So I guess this is proof Dirty White Boy is avoiding Tim Horner like the plague. Is he afraid that Horner can beat him? Maybe he is. Long story short, Dirty White Boy won. Shockingly, he defeated the champion of Canada, who had defeated everybody when defending the championship. And the gimmick was he had the match won 2 or 3 times, but kept pulling Newton Steffi up at the count of 2. And, that was that. So he wins with a Buckstorp Blaster, and we have some company in the ring.
Wait a minute, here comes Tim Horner out.
Now, what's he doing in there?
Horner, he's got a microphone.
Hey, let me tell you something. I was back there watching the TV monitor. That wasn't his name. That was my name you drew out of that hat, pal. And that just proves to me one thing. You're scared and you're a coward.
Let me tell you something.
Mr. Tim Horner, won't you do yourself a favor and do me a favor and get your butt back to Morristown, Tennessee with Mama before I hurt you?
Won't you hold this?
Whoa! Spun him right around. And the referee tries to get between them and stop it. Ron Wright's going to have a heart attack. He motions for the dirty white boy to come out of there. Still they face off and square off out there. The white boy says, give me that
Let
mic.
me tell you something now, boy. You don't cross the boundary. You want a shot at me? Well, you got it. But it's a non-title match. You beat me. You get a shot at the belt. You understand, punk?
All righty. So I got to say, the best part of any Tim Horner promo was the very beginning where his microphone did not work. Sadly, he quickly realized he had to turn the damn microphone on, and thus we had to listen to him talk. Anywho, so long story short, Dirty White Boy told him to get his butt back to Morristown, to get his butt back to Mama before he gets hurt. And he slapped Horner's chest. You know, you heard it. You know, it wasn't quite a chop, but it was more than a shove. But anywho, Horner slapped him. He bitch slapped Dirty White Boy. Not calling Dirty White Boy a bitch, just explaining what Tim Horner did here, folks. And so DWB agreed to a non-title match. And if Horner beats him in a non-title match, he will get an actual title match. So we're going to see what happens with those two. Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden versus Nitro Danny Davis and Dixie Dy-no-mite. Main event anywhere in the country right here. As we mentioned last week, there are 4 pushed babyface tag teams and only 2 pushed heel teams. So we're a little lopsided. It does help that, the Fantastics are going to and from Japan. And actually, that's why we're not going to see them wrestling on TV for, about a month or so, because they're currently being whisked away to a magic land at the moment. And then plus we have the Batten twins, who really aren't in much either, but still they're an established babyface team. But still, you have our 2 heel teams holding down the fort for everyone. Fuller brought out a stretcher to send a message to the Rock and Roll Express, apparently. They announced that the DWB Tim Horner non-title match is next week. And actually, if you recall, this is a rematch of the last 2 teams in the 4-team elimination match last month, which ended with the Stud Stable winning by disqualification when the Rock and Roll Express ran in. Dixie runs wild early, slamming both Fuller and Golden, which made the fans pop, considering the size difference in both men. Because, it's an absurd size difference here between, Dixie Dy-no-mite and Fuller and Golden. We get a crisscross spot with Danny and Golden, which is one of those spots you would see all the fucking time in the early 90s, but haven't seen it since like 1994. And I think we need to bring it back. They did a second crisscross spot, and Fuller put his knee into Danny Davis's back to get the heat. Dutch accused Cottle of being biased. If I was Michael Cole, this is where I'd point out that that's funny because Dutch is the one who's biased. Dixie gets the hot tag and runs wild in both heels, and we have our 4-way brawl. Dixie misses a crossbody up the middle, and Golden pitched him over the top, which would be a disqualification, but the referee was with Fuller and Davis. The finish was Gibson coming out to distract Fuller, and they did the WrestleMania 5 Rick Rude Ultimate Warrior finish as Golden goes for a suplex on Dixie Dy-no-mite, but Morton grabs his foot, hooks him. Dixie falls on top. Morton holds the leg, and Dixie Dy-no-mite with the surprise win, pinning Jimmy Golden here. Now, of course, our heels, they are not happy with this. And let's go to a show closing promo with Golden and Fuller.
All right, fans, let me remind you right here, next week you're going to see Tim Horner against the Dirty White Boy, the Heavenly Bodies against Rock and Roll. All of that's going to take place right here next week. Jimmy Golden.
I'm going to tell
Jimmy,
you something I ain't never in all my life had to wrestle in front of a bunch of more monkeys than I've ever seen right here in Packman, Kentucky before. I want to ask you another thing. Did you see what that Ricky Morton did to me out there? I ain't never been robbed so bad in all my life. He tripped me right there and held me down by the foot. I'm going to say one other thing to you, Rock and Roll Express. You won a few, we won a few, but the war is just getting started. You see this stretcher right here? Stretcher match, boys, it ain't going to be over with till both of you rock and roll punks is flat on this stretcher and they haul you out of here to the hospital.
You know, it's something that they know, Jimmy Golden. They know this is a team right here that should be in New York, Madison Square Garden. We should be in Atlanta. We should be on top in every big city in the world.
see you next week, fans. So long for now.
All right. So they talk about how they haven't been robbed so much in their entire life and how this will not be over until both Rock and Roll Express members are taken out on a stretcher. Now, you could make the argument that that must mean the feud still hasn't ended since, you know, Ricky and Robert were never officially taken out on said stretcher. Fuller screamed how they should be in Madison Square Garden or Atlanta as the show ends. Another really good episode. Remember, like, those first 10, 15 episodes building up Volunteer Slam, which were very hit and miss. And I mentioned that basically as soon as we got, you know, champions, you know, this shit took off and the territory pops. That's exactly what's happening here. Because even whatever you would say the weakest episode has been since Volunteer Slam, it's still miles ahead of what it was, you know, those first 10 to 12 weeks or so. So 33 down, 167 to go. And before we go, we're going to talk about what else is happening in the world of wrestling. And it is mostly a slow news week. But the big story, morale in WCW continues to tumble. This week was the famous moment when Bill Watts tried to get Brian Pillman to tear up his guaranteed contract and take a nightly deal in exchange for a push, which Pillman then responded to by saying he would be the highest paid jobber in the history of wrestling. So that's where we are in WCW. And to show you how slow of a news week this is, the second biggest story is that Survivor Series will be in Cleveland, headlined by Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage versus Ric Flair and Razor Ramon. And the second biggest match as of this moment, and somebody's over here screaming that that's not what ends up happening, but at the moment, the second biggest match is Big Boss Man versus Nails in a nightstick on a pole match. Big news here in 1992, folks. Also, their news is that Crush will be joining Animal as the new Legion of Doom. Do you not remember that? Don't worry. But so that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Smoky Mountain Re-Watch-Along Project. Like I said, 33 down, 167 to go. Hope you all enjoyed listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.